get the assessment, and sometimes it's just that, to get a professional's opinion on what they need. Then that includes the 3 free lab groups, the next 3 consecutive groups, which also monitoring people, everybody does that. But then some people just want to access those 3 groups and then they leave. And some people like the supported group and then they just keep going to the group. They have very little contact with the CRCs and that's what they do. They just like the support of the group and they go, and we don't follow to make sure they're doing anything else. You know, we'll hear when the group facilitator gives us an attendance report if they were there or not, but if they're not there, that's up to them. They're not non-compliant or anything.
So we don't track those people who are like attending our groups.
But we do. That's these people. That's the
no, well, like
the
as they're
part.
going through, like, okay, this person is no longer attending the group, so we can like kind of take them off our list of, you know, I just feel like if we have people going to our groups and we're not really like paying attention who's going and who's not just because they don't need monitoring, that's not necessarily like, I feel like we should know like who's in the group and when.
We do. Let me clarify what I meant by that is we are not making sure they're going. If they don't go, it's not out of compliance. So no, we're not reporting anything and we're not calling and saying, why didn't you show up to group last night? But we will still communicate with them. It's either in the policy manual or in the support paperwork that if they don't attend 4 groups in a row consecutively, then we'll close their file. But before closing the file, the CRC will still reach out to them, make sure that, you know, do not want us to close your case, or you coming back. So they'll still communicate with that person, and it'll be, it'll only be after missing 4 groups in a row that we
Thank you.
do anything. So that's what that lower teal colored bar is. Exactly. Those people. And so those are the people, the teal colored bar, the 38 people this year who apparently wanted something else besides the monitoring, and we can capture more of what they want perhaps on the support services side.
Right. So as proposed right now, there's not a whole lot of, in our current looking at support services, there's not a whole lot that's going to be proposed as it relates, we think, to transition assistance services. So it's not looking like we're going to really modify the 2 free career counseling sessions or the 2 individual free counseling sessions. What we could be looking at potentially is changing what is offered from support services. And so right now it's very similar to, you know, Michelle's talked about it several times. It's very similar to what monitoring offers, just without essentially the reporting aspect of that. A good place for us to gather data on, you know, what is working, what is not, is perhaps with these individuals, again, like asking them voluntarily information as to what has worked for them, you know, our cost barriers, if they're not required to do this. So there is some crossover here with the monitoring group as it relates to some of these things we're considering. But it's that group of, you know, and it's not very many people, frankly. So we're looking at 38 in 2022, but that's a group that we could look at as to how we want to perhaps augment or change the services that exist for those individuals.
So is that another working group you're looking for?
It could be. I think we should kind of get through all of this and then we can talk about whether or not we want a working group on that specific issue. We may frankly not be there yet, as we kind of talked about early on. We are officially fully staffed as of 4 days ago. So, you know, we may not, it may be that we want to focus, you know, there's only 7 people in the Lab Oversight Committee, and this is a volunteer job for all of you. And so, you know, it may be that I think everyone for the most part that's at least here today, so not Martin and Phil, but have already assigned themselves to work on an issue. And so it may be that we want to prioritize those issues for now, you know, with the time commitments you may already have, and then look at some of these issues down the road. But we just wanted to put everything out there today so that we can talk about this, you know, holistically, and then decide where to go from there. Okay, Jennifer, you want to go to the next slide for me? Thank you. Okay, so this is outreach. So this is the work that Lita has been doing, you know, day in, day out, week in, week out. So as you can see, it's climbed every year. The 2022 is year to date, which is, I believe, through December 1st. And so that's the total outreach, the MCLE presentations, and then the outreach to law schools and law students. And one of the conversations that Leah just mentioned before she signed off was talking about like metrics and things that impact how we measure the success of the LAP program. one of the metrics that we have had in the past that was reported to the Board of Trustees was the amount of outreach we did. But because it was a relatively new program, it was the benchmarks were pretty low. So it was 10 presentations to law schools and law students and 10 presentations to law firms or art associations. And as you can see by the numbers, Lita has exceeded that in every year she's been doing it essentially. So like, if the benchmark is 10 and she's doing 77, it doesn't really seem like a great benchmark at this point. So we're looking at what is a better way to measure outreach, right? Is it number of people? Is it number of presentations? Is it ultimately increases in people utilizing support services, not just like getting the word out itself, but how that what's it called in sales, like conversion rates essentially from the outreach to actually getting people to join the program in some capacity. And so that's something that we are looking into right now. And it's something that I think we're not going to have a decision on certainly today or maybe in the next, weeks or months, but something we're trying to figure out.
Erica, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When people do reach out to LAP, do we ask them how they learned about the program?
Yes.
Okay, so we would have the ability to track that if we wanted to.
Just a quick question. What does the outreach look like to law students at this point?
Very difficult. That we use social media, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I think are the three. I'm missing one. Twitter.
Okay.
But it's hard getting my foot in the door of law schools. There's certain law schools I'll go to 2 times a year, every year. University of Laverne, University of San Diego, very good. Certain law schools, no problem. UCLA, won't let me touch them. We have our own people, our own services. We don't need you. We don't want you. Very, very difficult getting into law schools. So to resolve that, what we've done is had like law school day, or state bar day. We've changed it to different names. And for this year, we actually made contact with 69 different law schools, totaling, I don't have the number in front of me, but I mean, I think it was several hundreds, maybe.
Yeah, Jennifer, go ahead and go to the next slide if you don't mind when you have a chance. It's there. Yeah. So this is Lita, and you're welcome to speak to this, but this is kind of the numbers in detail. So as it relates to law schools and students, there were 2 programs that were specifically hosted by Lita and the Lawyer Assistance Program, and those included attendees from 69 different law schools. So, and this is kind of a breakdown. So as you can see at the top, since the last meeting, so since September 30th, Lita has given 21 additional presentations. There have been approximately 1,800 people that attended those presentations, 3 for law schools with approximately 150 attendees. And then that's the year-to-date breakdown, including the estimated number of participants at these. And some of that's reported by the law firms and organizations that she attends. So like there's an estimate, right? That's kind of what that's based on. And then on the ones that Lita and Jennifer host for the state bar, it includes a more accurate count because we are, at least as it in regards to the MCLE, we are the ones who give the like certificate of attendance and things like that. So those are more closely tracked.
The one thing I may mention is when I do my MCLEs, one of the questions I ask attorneys is, how do you think we can get the word out about LAP? And 50, 60, 70% of the time is start in the law schools, which is like common sense. I mean, yes, preventive measures versus being reactive. But the thing is, I think one of the reasons, and maybe Bridget can speak to this, I think one of the reasons why law schools don't want me in there talking about substance use and mental health issues is that's kind of like it's not a good marketing tool for someone who, for a school who's collecting, $300,000 from somebody. We want you there from 1L, 2L, and 3L. We want that money coming in. So don't talk to my people about how this is a stressful job and you may have some issues can happen. It's just been very, very difficult.
And that,
Go ahead.
have
Have we ever phrased it as like, we want to come in and do something on work-life balance?
Oh, yes,
Okay.
yes.
And they still are like, no.
They were like, we need our
Apparently
students working.
Well, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
but I think there's, something to be said, for like trying to repackage it
Oh, yes.
But UCLA may still be stubborn. But I'm just wondering, like, one of the things I did when I was in law school is I was the job fair director for the Mid-Atlantic Black Law Students Association. And there was a lot of schools we hadn't gotten into, and I realized like once I sort of reframed what we were doing, and use it as like an experiential opportunity, that was more helpful. So maybe it's like reframing how we're doing it and what we're doing, and instead of just doing a presentation, maybe it's like tabling on their career day, or like, you know what I mean? Like just showing up and showing that we're invested in their students just as much as they are. And then over time, it builds that relationship. But that's just my thought, my 10 cents.
And I totally understand what you're saying. I mean, we've used, usually if the schools use food or, you know, a free massage, you know, you get to win a free massage if you come to this. Some of the schools are very creative, but again, it's just, I have to get past the dean
Yeah.
of you know, the dean, the registrar. I mean, there's just so many people I have to get past to get my foot in the door.
Sure.
And then once I get my foot in the door, they're like, oh my God, we love your presentation. But unless I get that door open, it's very
course.
difficult.
Yeah, that would be an interesting, again, we'll kind of think about prioritizing and how to do it, but if that is something that we want to prioritize is getting more access to law schools, we could think about how we can, you know, I don't know, get some more information about what the hesitancy might be. I mean, one thing that comes to mind is, and I used to work at University of San Diego, it's just why Leah's saying that, but I'm glad to hear they were open to having you. But I'm thinking that
Love that.
yeah, it's beautiful campus. It's great. But I wonder if people are worried about admissions, right? And if they're worried about, you know, it's I mean, one thing I did learn working at law school is it's all about the rankings. And if you're, you know, the more people you have that pass the bar and get into, you know, are admitted to practice. So if they're worried that having the bar come in and do something that's going to give us access to their students and alert us that maybe they might need some issues with moral character, whatever. I don't know. I'm just wondering if that might be part of the hesitancy in having us as the state bar come in. And if that's the case, how could we, you know, we just have to think about that. How might we address that? Or, you know, how can we ensure that that won't be a problem? I don't know.
That's part of our discussion about marketing as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Talking about the whole thing. So,
Right. And
I-
obviously we can't promise something that we can't
Yeah.
promise, but I
Right,
mean,
but I mean, instead of the state bar coming to look at you, you know, it's Joe's, you know, helpful organization, whatever it might be. But I want to tell you all, for your dollar spent for the other bar each year, we're very supportive of Lita's efforts and the efforts of the LAP to go out and do outreach. And the other bar also does a lot of MCLE programs, probably over 100 a year, much more than 100 a year. And goes into law schools, we try our best to get into law schools as well. And Hastings, Santa Clara, and some others, we're in there all the time. And so we dovetail and we try to support the LAP. We refer to the LAP a lot. And so, and I mean, we refer to the other bar as well. So it's a very good symbiotic relationship. So I just wanted to let you know that it's very supportive of each other.
And I think, I don't know, Jim, maybe you and Lee have already done this, but to the extent we could not get your list of contacts, but like see where you guys are already doing successful outreach. So maybe we could target other schools that aren't, you know, maybe there's a gap here. Maybe the other bar is already in and promoting the other bar as well as LAP. And Lita's, you know, in certain schools promoting LAP and the other bar. And maybe there are other schools that we're aware of, but don't have those relationships. And so maybe that's the spot to focus for now. Where we just want to get, if we're trying to get everybody in some manner to get those places where there's just silence perhaps currently.
Okay, and I'll try to have them have the capacity to talk with us about increasing the availability of remote meetings as well for law students, because it'll be overwhelming pretty quickly, I would hope, so that we'd have to split up the meetings.
Mhm.
Okay, will do.
You can go ahead to the next slide. Thanks, Jennifer. Oh, I think we skipped one, but it's a very high level guide. So this is just like, you know, to put it in a different visual, there's basically 3 things that are happening right now in the support services side. And that one in the middle, the clinician assessment, that's where there's the most potential for change. So individual and career counseling, unlikely to really change in the coming, year or so. Clinician assessment, we may be looking at changes to that, as we're truly splitting between monitoring and support services. And then education and outreach, I'd say the only change there is that we have more staff resources that we talked about kind of at the beginning of this meeting with, we have the additional senior program analyst, the senior education attorney, looking at additional ways to provide education and outreach from the lawyer assistance regarding the lawyer assistance program, regarding ways to either avoid, getting to the point where you need the assistance of the lawyer assistance program, and then like related law practice management issues and things of that nature. Okay, and then if you want to go to the next slide, Jennifer, thanks. So a couple things that have in the past year that have that could affect, will affect support services, frankly. So Business and Professions Code Section 6236 was recently amended as part of the fee bill in 2022, and as you may be aware, that was an urgency legislation. So it was signed in. So typically the fee bill goes into effective January 1st of the following year. This year was a little bit different. And so it went into effect, I believe, on September 28th, I think was the date, but don't hold me to that. And so a very minor change as it relates to the Attorney Diversion and Assistance Act is that what the state bar can engage in outreach on now includes behavioral health issues. So as you saw in the numbers that Michelle presented earlier this morning, there's a bit of a shift to a certain extent that originally, or more recently, a lot of attorneys are coming to LAP for more of behavioral health type things, as opposed to just exclusively substance use issues. And so the statute was amended to allow for an expansion of what we can provide outreach on.
I do want to ask this. I don't know, was our committee a part of that decision to seek the change in the statute to include behavioral health issues? I'm not complaining that it was, or that it involves that, but I am asking if we were involved in it, because I think this committee should be involved in that kind of an effort and the groundwork to lay to see if that's what we should be doing. So if we weren't involved, we should be in the future.
Yeah, I don't. So just historically, there have been changes to the statute or rules that we may have been given a heads up, but not necessarily been given the opportunity to provide input. And we should at least be given the opportunity to provide input along those lines.
Yeah.
So in this instance, I don't recall if we were just given a heads up, but this is kind of in line with where things are going.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I can think of other instances where like some of our money was used for other purposes where we were at least told that it would happen, but
Certainly. As we're talking today, so we've talked about how there may be, especially in regards to support services, how there may be changes that are necessitated as it relates to the lawyer assistance program rules, so the state bar rules.
Yeah.
We talked about they require board approval and stuff. And I certainly think that, we want you to weigh in on those rules. And so I think that, at least looking prospectively, there's no intent for us to not bring these things to you.
yeah, okay.
And that will be done. And now that we have more meetings, at least on the calendar for 2023, there will certainly be opportunities for us to give updates and things of that nature on all, not just related to statutory and possible rule changes, but on kind of all things support and monitoring. Because we'll just have more frequent opportunities to give those updates at the notice meetings.
Yeah, and just to the legislative piece particularly, we've kind of only recently started this legislative affairs office that we have going on now, the leg team, and that I'm on. So now I can be a good, liaison for you. But so I'm not sure the way things were developed in the past or how things make their way to the board. But the process, at least now, is that we start the process about now to think about what are some things that we need as a bar, and then but eventually, we develop a set of priorities. The board ultimately tells us these are the legislative priorities that we have for the bar as an organization. And then we don't know, the legislature will put whatever it wants in the bill. But, to the extent it's something that you have a feelings about, we can definitely make sure that we're communicating with you all about it. So I don't know particularly with respect to this change, how it all came about. But moving forward for sure.
Yeah.
Keep the lines of communication open. And next slide, Jennifer, thank you. And so this is another change that's has not occurred yet, but is proposed, and it's actually pending the public comment period. So that this was an item that was, we kind of touched on this a little bit at the September 30th meeting, but this is proposed amendments to the requirements for minimum continuing legal education. That's the requirements that all attorneys are required to complete 25 hours every 3 years, and there are certain credit hour requirements. Currently, one of those hours is required to be on substance use or other issues that may impair a licensee. So that's the first sub bullet that you can see on the PowerPoint slide. We've received a lot of public input, primarily from the San Diego Bar Association is a big one, that's talked about how this is, in this day and age, perhaps too narrow of a concept for attorney competency and things of that nature. And so what's being proposed and what's out for public comment right now is we didn't want to take away that 1 hour on the substance use and other issues that can result in impairment. And that's what Lita gives her presentations on currently. So bullet 1 here, or sub bullet 1. But what is being proposed is a second hour. And the second hour can continue to be on the substance use and other issues that can cause an impairment. So theoretically, an attorney could do 2 hours on that every 3 years. Or, I mean, they could also do, they couldn't do 25 because there's other credit hour requirements, but they could do, I want to say like 16 of their hours could be on this issue, frankly. But there's also an opportunity to have another, it's going to be called a wellness competency credit. So other things that are more broadly related to attorney wellness, and it can be physical or mental, so long as it has to relate back to the attorney's ability, the practice of law more generally. So, if you want to take a yoga class, it needs to be.
That's exactly what came to mind. I'm just gonna go to yoga class 6 times.
Right.
16 times,
Sure.
and then
Right.
I'll
Exactly.
get-
Right.
Solve the issue.
Right. I mean, certainly that promotes physical wellness, but it has to relate back to the practice of law. So if it's, yoga for lawyers, and half of it's doing the yoga course, but then the other half really relates back to why physical wellness is so important to, attorney competency, and not competency as it relates to ethics. I think that can be confusing for some, not as it relates, but competency and more their ability to practice holistically. So that's what that second hour is being proposed as. There are, just so you're aware, there are other changes being proposed to the MCLE requirements that don't affect competency. So there's a proposed amendment to require 1 hour of a course, 1 hour course on civility in the legal profession, as well as a 1 hour course requirement for technology in the practice of law. And so what is essentially being proposed is, I'm not going to get the numbers right. I think the attorneys are currently required to do 7 specific credit hours, and it's going to expand it to 10 that are required. And then another change that impacts MCLE credit is that we are considering expanding the ability for attorneys to get general credit, so not one of these specific credit hours, for certain moot court and mock trial activities. So a lot of attorneys participate in that. There's certainly benefits to doing that. You certainly, from a participant perspective, oftentimes learn a lot about the law when you're doing that, preparing for that. And so that's another proposed change as it relates to all of this too, just so you're aware. The public comment period, if anyone, or if you know of a group, or you yourself, or anyone wants to give public comment on this, it ends January 30th, just so you know. And that's currently accessible on the State Bar's website if anyone wanted to give public comments surrounding this issue.
I feel like there's a lot to say around it. I feel like it's a little vague.
Well, yeah, I'm kind of piggybacking on that. I don't know how your continuing ed is, but ours can be a bit of a circus sometimes, and not super well vetted presentations making its way in. So are there kind of standards for oversight? And I guess as a mental health professional, my biggest concern is spreading misinformation about mental health through this type of thing.
So, yes, to a certain extent. So the State Bar as a agency, we are we have a unit that deals with MCLE provider certification. And so, not to get too in the weeds here, because we could, but there's two paths you can take to have a program authorized for MCLE credit. You can become what's called a single activity provider, a SAP, or a multi-activity provider, a MAP. And so single activity providers, every course that they intend to provide, to offer for MCLE has to be approved in advance. And it goes through the MCLE provider office, and it's reviewed, the materials are reviewed, and it is approved or not approved. MAPs are slightly different. You have to have given a certain number of single activity provider courses in the past. And then if you have met a threshold number of those, you are approved for what's called MAP status. MAPs are audited, so they are required to provide some, but not all, of the presentations that they may have done to be evaluated retrospectively, not prospectively, which is that's the main distinction here. So yes, they are, but we don't see everything. Frankly, I don't know that the state bar, it's a relatively small office to begin with, but I don't know if everyone was employed in the state bar would be able to handle that, because there's a lot of MCLE out there, as I'm sure there is in, in your universe too.
Quality.
Yeah, exactly. So our office, Office of Professional Competence, for state bar programs, we look at those programs before they are offered for MCLE credit, but as far as it relates to external entities, that's how the process works.
I mean, I guess when I was saying vague, it kind of goes with what she was saying, but I think the parameters of what physical and mental wellness related issues are is so hard to define, and is the intent, if they change this to include this to the second hour, to define it more clearly so that like we can understand it, or if LAP wants to put on a program, like we understand what this means, or is it like, I'm going to give a yoga class, and as long as I talk about being a lawyer for like 10 minutes, that's good enough.
So 10 minutes would not be good enough. Let me just point that out. So there are constraints, and this relates to, in rule drafting, we're trying to be a little bit expansive in the rule so that we're not we, but providers are not being restrained by the rule or constrained by the rule. So as it relates to assuming, we're in the initial public comment process for this, but let's assume that it were to be ultimately adopted by the Board of Trustees, just for example's sake. What would likely occur as it relates to this is there would be more information available for providers as to what this really should look like on the State Bar website. We've talked about perhaps providing examples of courses that have already been approved, that are either drafted, by the state board, or if we can ask, a different provider who's willing to give their course as an example, so that there will be kind of, things that others can look to as to what this actually means. That may not directly address your question. It may be that you still want.
It helps.
Okay.
Yeah, it helps.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, this isn't the text of the proposed rule, right?
No, this is
This
a
is
paraphrasing of
Oh.
it. Yes.
So I think what you're
Yes.
like, oh, well, this isn't defined. I was like, I think like a proposed rule would have at least
It's a
some kind
little,
of.
I was like,
it is,
this is
but-
the
but it
language.
is not, to your point, I don't know if it's as
It's not
as you're suggesting, like what, like defining wellness or defining, but Lita has a good example that when she's out in the world giving her presentations, the way the rule is written right now and the way that the certification process is going right now, it's focused on prevention and detection.
Mhm.
So if you're talking about I feel like, I don't know what it's like 10%, if more than 10% or 20% of your presentation has to do with wellness, they're not going to count it right now.
Oh.
But when Lita's out and people are out, they want to know about wellness. They want to know about how to take care of themselves from a more holistic standpoint, so that, she could provide both of those things in a presentation, for example. But the way the rule is so narrow right now, focused just on prevention and detection. So we're trying to recognize that wellness, physical and mental wellness, is part of the bigger process. But you're right. You should look at the rule, and I
I
do
will,
encourage you to
yeah.
make a comment, because maybe that's something that we can, on the front end, narrow down, or in our policies,
Right.
Yeah.
address.
And I'll just add that the intent here, so there's discussions as to how many credit hours should be required, right? So, or required courses. We're not looking at changing the 25 hours, but this has expanded what you have to take theoretically. And so there was a thought, maybe competency should just be expanded to include wellness, so that it would just be 1 hour and it could be the substance use prevention detection or wellness as an option. And that didn't seem like we didn't want to do that, at least based on, that's not really what was proposed by staff. I think everyone's more comfortable with keeping the 1 hour we currently have on the substance use prevention detection issues. But it's that group that wants more and maybe wants to talk about, work-life balance that goes beyond prevention detection of substance use. Like that's something that currently might not qualify for MCLE credit. And so but in the future, if something like this were adopted, that it might. So.
And if you're interested in the history, it comes after the Hazelden Betty Ford ABA study. Patrick Krill was a author of that study, and KRILL, and he kind of coined the word wellness with the ABA, which is kind of filtered out to the different states and to us. And so wellness is all the new nirvana for all of us, to assert our wellness.
New age,
Right.
new agey,
Exactly.
litigate lawyer stuff. Yeah.
Incense and candles at the next meeting.
There you go.
You can go ahead to the next slide. So where we currently are is frankly in like the information gathering stage. So what we're trying to look at is what has worked well in support in the past, what support services might look like as we're starting to expand education and outreach, what's the need and where is the need and who needs it. Frankly, those are all things we're kind of looking at. So what we're hoping to do from an information gathering perspective is looking at, collaborating with Monitoring Lab, getting input from the group facilitators, other state bar offices. What are the needs of licensees? And this can range from talking with the Office of Chief Trial Counsel to see what are they getting complaints about, and when they're getting complaints about certain issues, is there an issue regarding the attorney themselves? Is it something where the attorney just needs more support of some kind, and what kind of support is that? And it may not frankly be related to lapse type things. It may be that they don't understand how to handle a client trust account. So that's completely not what we're hoping the LAP Oversight Committee will be looking at in any way, shape, or form. But if it's something along the lines of, I am completely stressed out, I'm experiencing issues related to ADHD, for example, that's maybe something where LAP Oversight or just, the LAP side could look at resources related to that. And resources could be many different things through many different medium. It could be providing information on an attorney resource page. It could be a presentation. It could be like a quick 10-minute video. We're looking at all types of different things that may reach attorneys in different ways and also reach, bar applicants and law students. So this is kind of where we are. And then as we switch to the new support services, what we're hoping is we can start gathering some information from those who are willing to provide it as to what brought them here in the first place, maybe kind of, anonymizing that information and tracking it to the extent possible so that that information can inform future decisions as it relates to some of this. And then as we've kind of talked about several different times, all of this would perhaps require changes to the state bar rules, and we will certainly keep LAP Oversight Committee involved in that to the extent it does need to occur. Okay, questions here? I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is kind of the planned 2023 activities, what we're looking at. So continuing to expand outreach efforts to increase the use of LAP, be it monitoring or support services. And we're looking at developing new resources on these topics, substance use, mental health, competency, practice management, and aging. I'm not sure doing all 5 of them in 2023 is frankly realistic, but we're looking at, that's where I'm talking about what, prioritizing things and looking at data that currently exists on what topics we may need more on and a more immediate need for. Another thing that's proposed for 2023, we've talked about this a little bit, but creating a licensee resource page. There is currently, as you all likely are aware, that there's the LAP resources page. There are attorney ethics resource pages, but they're very separate and apart from one another, and there are some crossover things there. It could be helpful just have a main attorney resource landing page where it's all there, and then people can click out of that into other web pages that will assist them in what they're looking for. But right now it's kind of hard to navigate these things from a resource perspective. And then the last thing is something that is probably towards the end of 2023, but looking at, disenfranchised and underserved lawyers who have unique law practice challenges and how Support Lab may be able to assist them.
If I could just make a comment, I think that last bullet point might more relate to one, because I think we've talked a lot about, well, I'm not going to call them disenfranchised, but we're talking about the solo practitioner out in a rural community may not have access, may not have a close network, is not, those things connected in my mind that maybe that could be part of the first bullet point, maybe to prioritize that, just because I think it fits well within that.
Yeah, agree. And I think part of that is, now that we're post-pandemic, so whatever you want to, to the extent we are, a lot of the services that LAP used to offer were in-person services.
Right.
And now that we've gone to the virtual format, it seems to be continuing to work from the group perspective and otherwise. It may just be providing information to people that they don't have, if you're in a Butte County, hypothetically, and I don't even know how isolated that is, frankly, but if you're there and you don't have to think you need to go to Los Angeles to get services, that you can get this support, in a virtual format. And I think that could be a benefit to people too, just from the marketing perspective that you were mentioning.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was thinking also on that last bullet point,
Yeah.
that it's not just like rural attorneys, but attorneys like nonprofit attorneys who kind of get like left out of the loop. And attorneys who are doing like certain types of law, like I would see that as like supporting them also. Things like vicarious trauma and trauma-informed learning, like things that like really impact them in a deeper way. And the reality is too, like a lot of law students go into these disenfranchised and underserved areas of law because they're not going to a big firm. So they're going to a nonprofit, some may go to government, but it's an opportunity also to try to capture the attention of somebody who may be newer to the law or maybe is not as connected in the legal community. I was thinking things like, one of the things I did when I was at another organization was short videos, because a lot of people like just don't have attention span anymore. And so like on the resource page or whatever, if you have like short FAQs or like, what is substance abuse and how someone talk about it for like 2 minutes, that will give people an idea of who we are and what we do. What is LAP? And then it creates more traffic too. So I think that landing page you're talking about in concert with some of these like newer types of technology.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm sorry, I'm smiling because we talked about this yesterday. We had a planning session on this, a staff planning session as to what we want to, now that we're fully staffed, on day 3, we were talking about these things, but it was talking about like, Lita's done a great job of having, working with some of the successfully completed.
The graduates.
Yes, the graduates.
Participants that graduated from lab.
Yes, and she's done interviews with them and they've been recorded and, editing those, to the extent they want them to be public, obviously we'd have to work through some of that, but that's a great, promotional thing to show a success story in LAP. As it relates to this new client trust account protection program and relating to some of the rules of professional conduct, we're doing what are called spotlight videos, which are 2-minute videos or less. That's the goal, because for that short attention span. They're on YouTube. They're on the State Bar website. You can take a look at them, but and on YouTube, and they can be shared on social media as well. And so to promote those things, I think that's a great thing we could look into for some of these topics. And it doesn't have to be, everything in the kitchen sink, especially if it's a 2-minute video, but if there's a very small area that we could focus on and provide outreach on, I think that's where we're looking with that's what we're calling like micro learning essentially.
One of the things you mentioned, like vicarious trauma, compassion, fatigue, PTSD, etc. Certain areas of practice, there's attorneys, obviously criminal law, family law, immigration law. And I talk about that, briefly in my presentations, but we could also focus on, those specific areas of practice that have specific types of mental health issues and substance use issues. But yeah, definitely agree with what you're saying there.
And I'll just add, it's not on this slide, but what an aspect of all this, like, this sounds like a lot, right? There's a lot of outreach. There's probably hundreds more topics we could give outreach on. We, part of what we're looking into doing is developing toolkits. So we could we're doing this with some other programs that we're working on in our office, but developing, slide packets, script packets. We're working on looking into developing like a brief speaker course on how to give presentations too. So that theoretically a small group who maybe doesn't have the resources could take this and run with it. And so it's not just necessarily that our office is, trying to have, a few people schedule presentations up and down California and doing that. And that's certainly an aspect of what we are doing, what we'll continue to be doing. But I think to the extent some of the stuff we're trying to do is also to package it so that others can do it. That may relate more to some of the ethics stuff that my office is doing, not necessarily the lab stuff, but it's certainly something we could explore as to whether or not some of this information is stuff that could be packaged as like a toolkit for other groups to take, like CLA Wellness, for example, if we wanted to take it, if we wanted to work collaboratively with them and develop a toolkit together, or have a toolkit ready that group could take, that the other bar may want to use to a certain extent. So that's kind of something we're looking at as well. So I think we just have one last slide on this. I told you to be a lot briefer. But so these are, just like we had ideas for what lab oversight could look into as it relates to the monitoring program. These are ideas. And again, from a resource management perspective, it may be that this committee wants to focus on monitoring for 2023 and wait till we're a little bit more developed as it relates to support services before jumping in here. But we certainly want to give you an opportunity. I mean, we plan to report as kind of a staff update at our upcoming meetings, kind of where we are on these types of things. But if anyone on the committee wanted to be more involved in that, other than us just reporting on it at the next meeting, we'd certainly be open to it.
I was gonna say, it kind of seems like these dovetail a little bit, especially like what Heather and I are gonna be working on. So it kind of seems like it would be more efficient to like focus on the program that's really already kind of fleshed out, and then we can borrow ideas from that.
Mm-hmm. Like if you come up with metrics to measure success or figure out what to measure in monitoring, we'll probably be able to use some of that on the support side too.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
But I do think the outreach and education piece is really important right now in terms of building the program. So I'm willing to step in and help on that. Because I think that it's really hard to build a program if you don't have enough participants to really evaluate and assess a program. So the more you can get people to engage with lab on the support side, I think the better chance we'll have of taking the benchmarks from the monitoring side and bringing some benchmarks over here, but with new benchmarks also to mark success in the support side. So that's just my 10 cents.
Sounds like you want to create a working group for outreach and education.
Sure.
And a working group of one is fine.
Yeah.
I'm
happy to be a working group of one.
with staff, obviously, you're not on your own.
Yeah. I'm okay with that.
I suggest that we focus on the monitoring side. It seems like we have a well-defined plan for that. There's already things in place. I think there's quite a bit of brainstorming that still need to occur for this. But if, as members go home over the next couple months, come up with ideas based on this presentation that would be within the scope, or if the scope, maybe expand the scope, what that might involve. Let's keep like a spot or an agenda item just for like committee ideas with respect to this issue, and then we could just start tabulating them. And then maybe when we get 5, 6, 7, we can think about whether we're ready to address those.
And we can keep the staff giving you updates at each meeting, like this is what we're thinking, it's what we're working on, get your input as we go.
If you need help, just let me know.
I will.
I'm like, I don't have to be a working group to be supportive.
Oh, you may regret that, but yeah.
Yeah, so I think we're like discussing items D2 and D4. Someone mentioned short attention spans. It's 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. Wondering, I just kind of want to get, gauge everyone's focus, if there was any ideas or things they want to discuss, or if if there's anything staff want to discuss. Because if there's not, I'm
I
going to do
wanted to discuss one thing.
Okay.
That is my high appreciation for what the staff has done and for the other committee members here and for what you've done in leadership. So I think this has been very important to attend this meeting and to be together and connect. It's been great improvement.
And I want to follow up on that, is that I can similarly feel like a lot of momentum, and I'm hoping that that can continue in like a virtual setting. So, because our next couple of meetings will be virtual, hoping we can continue that in February. So if there's nothing else, I wish everyone a happy holiday, and I'm moving to adjourn.
Just a quick question. Do we have all the dates for next year yet?
They were
Yes.
circulated, but we can certainly, we can resend that. Staff can resend
That would be
that.
great.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
probably somewhere buried in my email.
Yes.
And I just want to thank everyone. I think this was such a great meeting. I really appreciate all your thought and attention. Like you said, it's hard on a Friday, and I feel like you've been so engaged, and it's been really helpful to us to get a good sense of where we're headed.
Tracy, thank you for hanging in there.
Yeah,
Just
that
a
was
moment.
hard.
You're welcome. Thank you. It's been great. Happy holidays to everyone.
Happy holidays.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
So I think we should stop the recording.